Hi guys, hi, hello. Happy Friday. What we're going to be doing over the next couple of days is talking about more chaos and confusion layered on top of all of the other things that are happening in our country throughout this mid 1960s to 70s time period. And this will feel a little bit disjointed from what we've been talking about. We spent obviously the last week and a bit focused primarily on the again international conflicts of Bay of Pigs, of Vietnam, but there are other things going on at home that start up in the later part of the 60s in the midst of it, and we can't ignore them because they're important. There are other movements that are going to be basically inspired by the fight African Americans had started in the mid 1950s for other groups which had been marginalized or treated differently based off of things they can't control. The fight for civil rights is very simply as possible put, the fight for equality, being treated the same. And we're going to talk about some other groups over the next couple of days who also were fighting for that equality, fighting to be accepted for who they are. So you're going to grab out your notebooks and we're going to just keep on moving. This is all within the same era of time, so it's all on top of each other. So, we're going to talk a little bit about the growing Latino presence within our country. When we talk about Latinos, again, this is a shorthand version of referring to Americans of Latin American descent. Again, you're going to be seeing here that each group is coming from different places, but they're all coming from Spanish speaking countries, at least for the most part. You've got Mexico, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Central America, South America. Each group has its own history, has its own pattern of settlement, its own kind of set of concerns as far as that stuff goes to try and figure out. And during the 1960s, again, we're going to see here that the Latino population grew huge. It was a massive spike in the amount of people moving from other places coming into the United States. Of course, knowing that, and well, not knowing really what kind of mess the country is about to embark on with all of the fighting in Vietnam and all of the fighting within and all of that kind of stuff. These groups were coming to America because again, of course, we're looking for new opportunities, and there were a lot of opportunities in the country. So during the 1960s, we're going to see that this population spikes from 3 to 9 million. The largest group is going to be those migrating from Mexico into the United States, and that's still true to this day, that's the largest group of immigrants coming in. It's the largest Latino group. They're obviously going to kind of concentrate in the Southwest and California due to the proximity to Mexico. They reside in, again, the earlier territories, and they fled the revolution that was happening in Mexico at that time. They worked as temporary laborers, kind of just looking for any kind of opportunity to move forward. The next largest group within the Latino or Latin American presence in the States is going to be Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, I mean, again, they've always had kind of an open movement of migrants ever since we again took Puerto Rico as a colony, not colony, in 1898, and we've had a steady stream of Puerto Rican migration into the country ever since. Then we've got Cubans. We had a spike in Cuban population right around 1959 when the Cuban Revolution happened. The people who didn't want to live in communist Cuba. Then you've got all various different types of groups, most of which are moving to the United States because things in their own country are really bad. There's civil wars, there's chronic poverty, just trying to figure it out. When these people immigrate to the United States, and you have to realize that hey, most of them are coming in perfectly legal channels and they've been approved and they're coming here looking for jobs, looking for somewhere to live. And well, since they're different, they don't fit, they encounter the same kind of prejudice that African Americans had been dealing with for hundreds of years in our country, 150, about 100 years or so in our country ever since they were freed. So they're going to be looked over for jobs. They're not going to be allowed to live wherever they want. They are facing the prejudice and discrimination that applies to African Americans, but also applies to anyone who's different. And the places where they end up kind of being pushed into are these segregated neighborhoods that are going to be Spanish speaking primarily because they're living together. Why would they learn English if they can just living with other Spanish speakers? They're going to keep speaking Spanish. Again, of course, barrio is just looking at Spanish version of the ghetto that has developed in other American cities around the country. When we look at this, all of these people who came to the States looking for new opportunities, well, they're not finding it. So they're going to see that there is an unemployment rate and poverty rate that is 50% higher than white Americans. This is intense. That's an intense difference overall. And, well, taking cues from the African American population, they're going to start to fight for change. I mean, if the African Americans can go about doing this and trying to get this figured out, why shouldn't they also try and again basically get representation and have equal opportunities to be respected in our country, the great melting pot of America that seems to not want to accept these groups for whatever reason. Um, so, as we've seen before, the first step that a lot of groups who are looking for change are going to do is they're going to organize. Probably one of, again, not probably, the most famous of these organizations in the mid 1960s into the 70s is going to be not a very cleverly named, but still, the United Farm Workers Organizing Committee. This right here is going to link up not just again Latino individuals, but also Filipino, another and large immigrant population in this time, and they're going to create this sort of alliance between them to create some kind of agricultural union. As I said, most of the jobs that Latinos are going to end up being able to find are low paying, low skill. And a lot of that is in agriculture, thinking migrant workers who follow harvest to harvest, again, working temporary jobs. Within this overall process, various different individuals are going to rise up to kind of lead and to lend some focus to this. You've got of course, the excuse me, the very famous Latino rights leader of Cesar Chavez. You've got Dolores, again, names that I can't say well, and the various other women in here that they created this group, and they insisted, again, starting small because again, you can't change everything overnight. They insist that California's agricultural companies they have to accept the union and have to be able to give them some power. When the various different egg companies refused, the grape growers they also refused, aka there was a boycott. They refused to again kind of go through. They refused to buy and they refused to work in this boycott, including supermarkets, again, really hurt the agricultural sector economically. Chavez went on a fast basically this idea of kind of starving himself to prove a point. And in the end, they win. Some changes start to happen, and benefits that had long been denied from the again Latino population in California are going to start to be allowed. Are going to be supported and given to them. Besides just the economic and equal opportunity side of things, another really important facet of Latinos coming into America and facing this discrimination has to do with being proud to be Latino, to be proud to be connected to these places they came from. And so often they're going into schools and they're being treated so poorly. I mean, they're trying to get education, but they can't. And they're being forced to, again, do certain things and act certain ways. So the Brown Power movement is again, based off of the Black Power movement, where people are going to individually decide their own goals and be proud of who they are. And they're going to go the legal route. I kind of trying to through the legal system, figure out what is it that they need and how are they going to get it. In 1968, they do win a pretty big moment with the Bilingual Education Act, which provided funds for schools to develop bilingual and cultural heritage programs for English as a second language learners. Again, students who are learning English or know some of it, and then they're coming in and they're behind because of that, again, difference. It also, of course, inspires young people to again express their pride and to be open about who they are and where they come from. Again, Chicano or Chicana was in that time period a nickname or a group that, again, a name that was given to young Mexican Americans who were very open about their pride in being from Mexico. Um, Kind of the last one right here is La Raza Unida. Again, of course, the Spanish I can't say because I don't speak Spanish, but close enough. The People United. All right. So this right here was an attempt to try and get representation in the government, to be able to elect Latino or people of Latino descent into office. Again, it's a political party that is outside of the regular Democrat, Republican process, and they're pretty successful. They get elected to a lot of different important roles and have the ability to, of course, properly represent the needs and wants of the Latino people or population in our country. There were, of course, within a movement, there's always radicals. The radicals within this movement said that, well, America stole the land from Mexico, so they need to give it back, and they should have control of it. Yeah, that's a very slim minority of this fight that goes down here, and no one gives them a lot of attention in the long run. Okay. So the other group that we're going to talk about briefly is a group who long overdue needs some rights back, because since Europeans arrived on the North American continent, they have been doing the Native Americans dirty, is how I always kind of think about it. So we're going to see that inspired, I guess, just reinvigorated by the movements of the African Americans and Latinos at this time. Native Americans are going to try again to persuade the government to treat them fairly, to give them the things that they need to be successful. For years, obviously, Native Americans have struggled to regain control over their own lives. Autonomy is what that is referred to as. In this moment in time when there is a lot of struggle going on in the country, Native Americans still, again, clock in at the very bottom of the social hierarchy. They're the poorest people in the countries. They have the highest unemployment. They're much more likely to suffer from tuberculosis, alcoholism, because of lack of health care, lack of, again, proper treatments, things like that. And, well, again, it's just not okay. Eisenhower changed the game one more time because the government can't seem to settle on anything, that uprooted reservations, and it really disrespected the culture of Native Americans. But in 61, they're going to start to push back and to fight back once more. Again, in 1961, the American Indians at that time are going to basically publish a declaration of Indian purpose. 61 different Native American groups are going to come together in a way that they never had before, and basically list off their demands to the federal government, stressing to them that they need to be able to choose their own way of life. The government should not be interfering with them. They need to stop this termination plan that Eisenhower had created, and to figure out new policies that can actually support these citizens that the federal government has been jerking around for hundreds of years. So in creating new economic opportunities on the res and new kind of movement to go with this. As this is kind of getting together, a organization forms, again, very similar to that of the Latino population of the African Americans. This group is called AIM, this American Indian movement. It's young Native Americans who are very dissatisfied with the way things have been moving. They take on a bit more of a militant self-defense group than, again, the other groups that we've seen. Of course, that does change in the later part of the 60s with African Americans as well. And they're dedicated to fighting for the rights of Native Americans. They confront the government in various different ways. They, again, protest outside of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. They, and quite famously, take control of Alcatraz Island, which is really interesting. Again, in the bay off of San Francisco, where Alcatraz prison lies, AIM actually stages a protest where they seize control of the island in hopes of bringing attention to the injustices that the government has laid down upon their people time and time again. The cool thing that kind of goes down with this, and you'll have to go in the book for a little bit more detail if you choose this particular group for, excuse me, your assignment that you guys have got, is looking at the different acts. There's a whole bunch of different ones that come down here. There's Indian education, which looks at reservation schooling and giving them more control over what they teach. There's Indian self-determination, which is looking at reservations and what can and can't happen. The claim settlement, which is mostly looking at where is the money gone and where is it going, so on and so forth. There's a whole bunch of different things that they managed to win by the end of the 1960s going into the 70s. And that's it for now. On Monday, we're going to talk about another group that is once again going to rise up and ask for to be treated differently. Again, be treated the same because they're being treated differently. I apologize. But till then, these are the things you got to focus on. You've got, by Monday, you should have started Local History Part 2. Again, it doesn't have to be finished. It can just be a little bit. I just need to see that work has begun. If you have specific questions, you should let me know. This is part of the rubric, and I will be keeping track of that. In your overall score, it states that you have to be working a little bit before the due date. The next thing that'll be due is going to be the compare and contrast assignment, which will be posted with today's lecture. You're choosing one of the civil rights movements that we're talking about today and on Monday, and comparing it to the African American one. So you'll need your notes from Unit 4 somewhere handy, or at least the ones that are online. The next thing after that is the end of Unit 5, which will be this coming 1 week from today on Friday. Unit 5 assessment, again, it'll just be like the others that we've had thus far, online, in a form, open from, again, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. is what we're going to go with this time around. If you can't complete it during that window, you'll hear from me pretty fast, again, about what'll happen, again, overall. There is a review packet out there. Again, it's extra credit, not required. It should be done before you take your assessment. It is not helpful to you if you finish it after your assessment, okay? So please keep that in mind. And then, of course, your Local History Part 2, which will be officially due on Monday the 11th by 3 p.m. Again, it'll be submitted to Turnitin.com. In order to access Turnitin.com, you got to look at the how-to PowerPoint because it has got the information you need right there. Check out those examples of students past. Again, email me with questions if you got them. And that's it for the day. I hope you guys have a good weekend.